From the outside, we probably looked like the perfect family. My dad, James Wilson, ran a successful medical equipment business that kept us in a beautiful two-story house in one of the city's nicest neighborhoods. My mom, Diana, was what people called a lady of leisure. She never worked a day in her life, and honestly, she didn't need to. Dad made more than enough to keep us comfortable and fund Mom's expensive tastes. I remember watching Mom get ready for her days when I was little. She'd spend hours in front of her vanity, applying creams and makeup, styling her honey blonde hair until it was just right. "Carrie, sweetie," she'd say to me, barely glancing away from her reflection, "a woman must always look her best. That's how I got your father, you know." Dad worked long hours, but he always made time for me. He'd come home tired but would still sit with me while I did my homework, actually listening when I talked about school or my friends. Mom, though. Mom was different. She was like a butterfly, always flitting from one thing to another, shopping trips, spa days, lunch dates with her friends. Sometimes I'd catch Dad watching her with this look in his eyes, a mixture of love and something else I couldn't quite name back then. Now I know it was worry. I was 9 when it happened, the day everything started to crack. It was a Tuesday, I remember, because we had art class, and I'd made a painting I was excited to show Mom. Dad was away on business, something about a big contract with a hospital in Chicago. It was supposed to be a normal day. But when I got home from school, the house was locked. No Mom. No note. No answer on her phone. Just silence and our neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, looking at me with pity from her porch. "Your mother left with her friends about 2 hours ago, dear," Mrs. Peterson called out. She was wearing that new blue dress she bought last week. I sat on our front steps, my backpack beside me, the painting I'd made crumpling slightly in my hands. 1 hour passed, then 2. The sun started to set, and still no Mom. My 9-year-old mind couldn't understand how she could just forget about me. Finally, with trembling hands, I called Dad. "Daddy, nobody's home, and I can't find Mom." The silence on the other end of the line was scary. When Dad spoke, his voice was tight, controlled. "Stay right there, princess. I'm coming home." Dad made it home in record time that night, breaking every speed limit between Chicago and home. I could see the worry lines etched deep on his face when he checked on me at Mrs. Peterson's house. "Try to sleep, princess," he said, kissing my forehead. "I'll handle this." The next morning, around 7 a.m., I heard a car pull up outside. Dad, who hadn't slept all night, motioned for me to stay quiet as we heard the front door open. Mom stumbled in, her blue dress wrinkled, her perfect hair a mess, and lipstick smeared across her cheek. She reeked of wine and cigarettes. "James," she gasped, dropping her designer purse. "What are you? Weren't you in Chicago?" "Don't." Dad's voice was ice cold. "Just don't, Diana." Mom tried to laugh it off, smoothing her hair with shaking hands. "Oh, honey, you're making such a big deal out of nothing. I just had a little get-together with the girls." "A little get-together?" Dad exploded. Our 9-year-old daughter was locked out of the house. She sat on those steps for hours. Hours, Diana. What kind of mother forgets her own child? I'd never seen Dad so angry. Mom's face crumpled, and the tears started flowing, perfect, mascara-stained tears that somehow made her look like a tragic movie star. I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I just lost track of time. It won't happen again, I promise." Dad forgave her a week later, but something had changed. I noticed it in the little things at first. Mom stopped asking me about school. My drawings no longer earned a place on the fridge. When I'd try to show her something, she'd wave me away with a distracted, "Not now, Carrie." But when Dad was around, it was different. She'd suddenly become Mother of the Year, pulling me into dramatic hugs and calling me a sweetie and a darling. The moment he left the room, though, the ice would return. I tried everything to win back her love. I started getting perfect grades, thinking maybe that would make her proud. I learned to do my own hair and pick out my clothes so she wouldn't have to help me. I even tried to copy the way she talked and walked, hoping she'd see herself in me and love me for it. One day, I made her breakfast in bed, burnt toast and lumpy oatmeal, but I was only 10. I carried it up to her room, so proud of myself. "What's this mess?" she said, looking at the tray with disgust. "Carrie, you've gotten crumbs all over my new duvet. Just go away." That was the moment I realized the truth. My mother didn't love me. She loved herself, her friends, her shopping trips, and the lifestyle my father provided. But me? I was just an accessory, something that came with the perfect life she'd married into. I became Daddy's girl after that. Dad noticed the change in Mom's behavior, I could tell, but he tried to compensate by spending even more time with me. We had our special rituals: Saturday morning pancakes, evening walks where he'd tell me about his day at work, weekend trips to the museum when Mom was too tired to join us. One afternoon, I overheard Mom on the phone with one of her friends. "Oh, you know Carrie," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "She's such a daddy's girl. Always hanging around James, following him like a little shadow. It's pathetic, really." But it wasn't pathetic. Dad's love was real. It wasn't wrapped in designer packages or hidden behind perfect makeup. It was in his tired smiles after long days at work, in the way he never missed a school play even when he had important meetings, and how he actually listened when I talked. Everything changed the summer I turned 16. Dad started getting these headaches that wouldn't go away. Then came the dizzy spells, the unexplained weight loss, the nights when he'd wake up in cold sweats. Mom acted annoyed, like he was doing it on purpose to inconvenience her. "James, do you really need to see another doctor?" she'd complain. "These specialists are so expensive, and you're probably just overworked." But I saw how his hands would shake sometimes, how he'd stop in the middle of sentences like he'd forgotten what he was saying. It scared me to death. The doctors passed us from one to another. Blood tests, MRIs, specialists with names I couldn't pronounce. Nobody could figure out what was wrong until finally, one doctor called with the answer we'd been dreading: cancer. A rare type that had already spread through his body. Dad set up his office at home, running his medical equipment business from the study while going through treatment. I'd bring him tea and sit with him during conference calls, watching him put on a brave face for his clients even when I knew he was in pain. Mom, though. God, I'll never forget hearing her on the phone with her friends. "It's just so exhausting," she'd whisper when she thought no one could hear. "Do you know how hard it is to cook all these special meals? Everything has to be organic now, no processed foods. And the house smells like a hospital with all these medications. I can barely stand it." I wanted to scream at her, throw her precious phone across the room. Dad was fighting for his life, and she was complaining about cooking? But I kept quiet. Dad didn't need to know how selfish she was being. He needed to focus on getting better. For a year, we lived like this. Dad working from his study, me helping where I could, Mom making a show of being the devoted wife when people were watching but whining to her friends the moment they left. Then came the day that shattered whatever hope we had left. Dad called Mom and me into his study. He looked so tired, sitting behind his big desk that seemed too large for him now. "I'm selling the business," he said without preamble. "The doctors." Dad's voice cracked. He took a deep breath. "They say I don't have much time left. Maybe a few months." The world stopped. I couldn't breathe. "No," I whispered. "No, Daddy, they're wrong. They have to be wrong." "Princess," he reached for my hand. "The company needs strong leadership. Neither of you are in a position to run it. Carrie, you're too young, and Diana, well, it's not your field. I need to sell while it's still valuable, while I can make sure my employees are taken care of and you both will be provided for." I broke down sobbing, clutching his hand like I could somehow keep him with us through sheer force of will. Through my tears, I saw Mom dab at her eyes with a tissue, making little whimpering sounds. But when Dad looked away, her face was blank, calculating. She wasn't crying at all. That's when I knew she wasn't grieving for her dying husband. She was already planning for her life without him. Dad got worse quickly after that. Each day, I watched him fade a little more. The strong man who used to carry me on his shoulders could barely walk to the bathroom without help. We hired a nurse, Mrs. Rodriguez, who stayed with him during the day. I'd rush home from school, not even bothering to change out of my uniform, just to spend every possible minute with him. Mom, though, she was barely around anymore. She'd breeze through in the mornings, perfectly made up, designer bag on her arm. "I can't stay," she'd announced to no one in particular. "This house, it's just too depressing. The smell of medications, the medical equipment, it's not good for my mental health." One evening, when Dad's condition got so bad they had to rush him to the hospital, Mom stopped coming home at night completely. She'd show up early in the morning, looking fresh and happy. Actually happy, while Dad was dying in a hospital bed. I couldn't take it anymore. One morning, I confronted her in the kitchen. "Where were you last night?" I demanded. "Dad was asking for you." "That's none of your business, Carrie," she said, fixing her lipstick in her compact mirror. "None of my business? He's dying, Mom. Your husband is dying, and you're out God knows where, coming home with this stupid smile on your face like." She snapped the compact shut so hard it cracked. "Listen to me very carefully," she hissed, getting right in my face. "You might be Daddy's precious little princess, but he won't be around much longer. And then it'll be just you and me. If you want to make it to college, if you want any kind of future at all, you'll learn to show me some respect. I can make your life absolute hell, Carrie. Don't test me." A week before my 18th birthday, Dad died. It was a quiet Wednesday morning. I was holding his hand, telling him about my college applications, when he just stopped breathing. Just like that, he was gone. The funeral was a show. Mom pulled out all the stops, the grieving widow in her designer black dress, dabbing at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. She even managed to squeeze out a few tears during the eulogy. "James was the love of my life," she sobbed to the gathered mourners. "I don't know how I'll go on without him." But the moment the last car left the cemetery, it was like someone flipped a switch. The tears dried up instantly. She was humming, actually humming, as we drove home. I sat in the back seat, still in my black dress, watching this stranger who wore my mother's face. She didn't even look at me when we got home. Just kicked off her heels, poured herself a glass of wine, and started making phone calls to her friends. My father wasn't even cold in his grave, and she was planning lunch dates. Going back to school after Dad's death felt surreal. Everything was the same, the lockers, the squeaky floors, the drama about who was dating who, but nothing felt real anymore. I'd sit in class, staring at my textbooks, and all I could think about was Dad's empty chair at home. Then came my 18th birthday. I woke up early, half hoping Mom might remember, might at least say something. The house was empty. No note, no card, nothing. Just silence and the faint smell of Dad's aftershave that still lingered in the hallway. My best friend Sarah insisted on taking me out. "You can't spend your birthday alone," she said. "We're going to celebrate, even if it's just a little." So we went to this little cafe downtown, the one Dad used to take me to for hot chocolate when I was little. Sarah and a few other friends had gotten me a cake, and they sang "Happy Birthday" quietly so we wouldn't disturb the other customers. For a moment, surrounded by their love, I almost felt okay. I didn't want to go home that night. Sarah offered her couch, and I accepted. "Mom probably won't even notice I'm gone," I told her, trying to laugh it off. When I came home the next morning, there was a strange car in our driveway, a flashy red convertible that screamed midlife crisis. I walked in to find Mom in the kitchen with a man I'd never seen before. He was maybe 35, with styled hair and an expensive watch. Mom was hanging on his arm, giggling like a teenager. "Oh, there you are," Mom said when she saw me, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Carrie, meet Robert, my fiance." I stood there, frozen. Dad had been dead barely a month. "You're, what?" "Don't look so shocked, darling," Mom laughed, but her eyes were cold. "Life goes on. And speaking of that, She straightened up, dropping the sweet act entirely. You need to pack your things and leave. What? I thought I must have heard wrong. Leave? This is my home. Not anymore, Mom cut me off. Your father is gone, and all his money is mine now. I can finally live the way I want, with who I want. She smiled up at Robert, who at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. I'm done playing mommy. You're 18 now, legally an adult. I'm not obligated to support you anymore. You can't just throw me out. I protested, but Mom was already heading upstairs. I heard her pulling my suitcase from the storage closet. Watch me, she called down. Robert and I want to renovate, maybe turn your room into a home gym. You have 30 minutes to pack what you need. Anything you leave behind goes in the trash. I stood there in shock as she started throwing my clothes into the suitcase. Pictures of Dad, my school things, my whole life, all being packed away like trash. When I tried to argue, she grabbed my arm and practically dragged me to the door. You're 18 now, Carrie. Welcome to the real world. She shoved the suitcase at me and slammed the door in my face. Standing on the sidewalk with my entire life crammed into one suitcase, I did the only thing I could think of. I called Sarah. Oh my God, Carrie, she gasped after I told her what happened. Get in a taxi right now. You're coming to stay with me. Sarah lived in a small apartment near downtown. Her parents had gotten it for her when she started community college, and now she was insisting I take her spare room. It's not much, she said, helping me unpack my hastily thrown together belongings. But at least your mom won't know where to find you if she decides to cause more trouble. Thanks, Sarah, I managed, finally letting the tears fall. I don't know what I would have done. Hey, what are best friends for? She hugged me tight. Besides, your dad was always so good to me. Remember how he'd let me stay for dinner whenever my parents were fighting? The next week passed in a blur. I threw myself into studying for finals, trying not to think about how I was basically homeless. My teachers were understanding, word had gotten around about Dad's death, and now this. They gave me extra time to complete assignments, but I didn't need it. Studying was the only thing keeping me sane. Then came the call from Mrs. Peterson, our old neighbor. Carrie, honey, her voice was hesitant. I thought you should know, your mother is planning an engagement party. At the house. Next week. My stomach lurched. An engagement party? Dad's only been gone for 6 weeks. I know, dear. I'm so sorry. There are caterers coming, and she's having the whole place decorated. I thought you should hear it from me rather than through the grapevine. I sat on Sarah's couch after that call, shaking with anger. The house where Dad died, where all our family memories lived, was going to be filled with people celebrating my mother's new relationship. Would she take down the family photos first? Or would she leave them up, proof of the life she was so eager to forget? 3 days later, my phone rang again. This time, it was an unfamiliar number. Is this Caroline Wilson? A formal voice asked. Yes, this is Carrie. This is Mr. Davidson from Davidson and Associates Law Firm. I'm the notary handling your father's estate. I need you to come to my office as soon as possible. There are some important matters we need to discuss. My heart started racing. My father's estate, but I thought. Please, Miss Wilson. It's better we discuss this in person. Can you come by tomorrow morning? I agreed, my mind spinning. What could this possibly be about? Mom had said all Dad's money was hers now. What else could there be to discuss? The law office was in one of those old downtown buildings with dark wood paneling and brass fixtures everywhere. Mr. Davidson's office smelled like leather and coffee, and he gestured for me to sit in a large chair across from his desk. Miss Wilson, he began, pulling out a thick envelope. Your father, James Wilson, left his entire estate to you, Caroline. This includes the house, all proceeds from the sale of his company, and all other assets except for a few specific items. I sat there, stunned. Everything? Yes. The house is in your name now. There's also a substantial trust fund set up specifically for your college education. He slid a letter across the desk. And your father left this for you. With shaking hands, I opened the envelope. Dad's familiar handwriting filled the page. My dearest Carrie. If you're reading this, then I'm gone. I'm so sorry I couldn't be there to see you grow up, to walk you down the aisle someday, to meet my grandchildren. But I hope this letter helps you understand some things. I knew about your mother's affair. I knew about Robert. I've known for a while, but I stayed for you. I couldn't bear the thought of leaving you alone with her. I also knew that if I left everything to Diana, she would spend it all on herself and that man, leaving nothing for your future. So I made a choice. Everything goes to you, the house, the money from the company sale, everything. Diana gets only the car and the jewelry I bought her over the years. It's more than she deserves. If you want to help your mother someday, that's your choice. But remember this, you owe her nothing. She made her choices. Now you get to make yours. I love you more than anything in this world, princess. Make the life you want. Love always, Dad. Tears blurred my vision. But I looked up at Mr. Davidson. Why wasn't my mother here for this? He adjusted his glasses uncomfortably. We tried to reach her multiple times. She wouldn't take our calls, so we sent a formal letter. She never responded. I let out a bitter laugh. She's too busy planning her engagement party. She probably threw the letter away without reading it. The irony hit me then, while Mom was decorating my childhood home for her party, planning her new life with her younger man, she had no idea she was about to lose everything. The night of Mom's engagement party, I stood across the street from my childhood home, watching cars pull up and well-dressed guests stream through the front door. Music and laughter spilled out into the evening air. I walked up the familiar pathway, my father's will tucked safely in my purse. The front door was open. Mom always did love to show off the house to her friends. I stepped inside, and for a moment, nobody noticed me. Then Mom saw me. Her face went from champagne flush pink to ghost white in an instant. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, rushing over. "Get out. You weren't invited." Her voice carried across the room, and suddenly all eyes were on us. Mom, never one to miss a chance to play the victim, turned to her guests with theatrical distress. "I'm so sorry, everyone. This is my daughter, she's been having such a hard time lately. She keeps begging to come back home, but she's 18 now, and Robert and I need our space to start our new life together." The guests, Mom's loyal squad of social climbers and gossips, tittered sympathetically. Some shot me pitying looks, others whispered behind their hands. "Actually," I said, my voice clear and steady, "I'm not here to beg for anything. I'm here to take what's mine." Mom let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "Yours? Oh, sweetie. Nothing here belongs to you. This is my house now, bought with your father's money. Money that, I might add, you won't see a penny of." I opened my purse slowly, deliberately. "That's interesting, Mom, because according to Dad's will," I pulled out the documents, "this house belongs to me. Along with everything else, the money from his company, the investments, all of it. Everything except your car and jewelry." The silence that fell over the room was deafening. Mom's face went from white to red. "You're lying," she sputtered. "This is ridiculous. Would you like to read it?" I held out the will. "It's all very clear. Dad knew about Robert, by the way. He knew you were planning to spend everything on your new life together. That's why he left it all to me." The whispers started. Mom's friends, who moments ago had been laughing at me, were now staring at her in shock. Robert had gone very still, his champagne glass frozen halfway to his mouth. "So," I continued, raising my voice slightly, "since this is my house, I'm going to have to ask everyone to leave. Unless you'd like me to call the police and have you removed for trespassing." The exodus was almost comical. These people who'd been celebrating my mother's fresh start couldn't get out fast enough, murmuring awkward excuses as they hurried past. Within minutes, only Mom, Robert, and I remained. Carrie, sweetheart, Mom's voice had turned sugary sweet. We can work this out. We're family. Family? I cut her off. You kicked me out on my 18th birthday. You didn't even wait until Dad was cold in his grave before moving your lover in. That's not family, Mom. But where am I supposed to go? Her voice cracked. For the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. That's not my problem. I pointed to the door. You have until tomorrow to get your things. Anything left behind goes to charity. They left, Mom still protesting, Robert silent and sheepish. I watched from the window as they drove away in his flashy red convertible, Mom's engagement party decorations still hanging sadly in my foyer. 2 weeks later, Sarah told me she'd heard through the grapevine that Robert had broken off the engagement. Mom tried calling me a few times after that, leaving voicemails about family loyalty and forgiveness. I blocked her number. I graduated high school that spring with honors. Dad's college fund meant I could go anywhere I wanted. I chose a university across the country, as far from Mom as I could get. I sold the house, too many memories, both good and bad, and used some of the money to buy a small apartment near campus. I haven't spoken to her since that night. I doubt I ever will. Some people say forgiveness is important, that you should try to maintain family ties no matter what. But Dad taught me something different, that real love doesn't come with conditions, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from toxic people, even if they're family.